At the 1997 San Diego Comic-Con, attendees were treated to a fan film from former Fox Kids animator Kevin Rubio called Troops.
Troops was a parody of the Fox docuseries Cops set in the Star Wars universe. The film revolved a film crew following two stormtroopers who were attempting to locate the stolen Death Star planets at the moisture farm of Owen and Beru Lars. After transitioning Luke Skywalker's aunt and uncle into their action figure states, the troops then received a call about a disturbance at the Mos Eisley Space Cantina.
The film would receive overwhelmingly positive reviews, with even George Lucas coming to acknowledge the film as being canon to the Star Wars universe. Rubio would actually go on to continue work with Lucasfilm by doing a comic book series called Tag and Bink.
This would be another parody story following two lowly stormtroopers who blundered their way through the background of the Star Wars saga.
Now, as much as I'd love to talk about Tag and Bink and the inspiration behind them, that's really going to have to wait for its own show. As for Rubio, well, he would move on to the appropriately named Red 5 Comics. You might remember Red 5 as the publishers of Neozoic, the book whose back cover claimed it was all ages friendly, and yet it had a panel depicting one of the female characters having engaged in a threesome. Anyway, technically Rubio wasn't responsible for that book, but he was responsible for the book we're covering today. This is Abyss.
16-year-old Eric Hoffman flips through a comic book while his private jet prepares to land. He's joined by General Frank Grant, who tries to get Eric to take the situation seriously. Eric's father, Rafer, has died recently, and it now falls to the boy to take over the Hoffman's billion-dollar weapons manufacturing company. Eric just continues to take everything in stride. He's never had a good relationship with his father. Rafer just shipped Eric from boarding school to boarding school. He signs the papers transferring control of Rafer's assets and is left with a Cookie Monster jar containing Rafer's ashes. As the room clears, Grant gives Eric a hard drive to use on his father's computer. Eric inspects the hard drive and inadvertently bumps a bust to William Shakespeare, revealing it to be a cookie jar. Eric then inspects the Cookie Monster jar and discovers a switch that opens a secret door. Waiting behind the door is a robot that immediately goes into kill mode, only to wind up being called off by Rafer Hoffman, who isn't as dead as previously thought. Rafer reveals that he now resides in a secret lair below the Hoffman mansion, something Eric had wondered about earlier. Rafer explains that Eric's schooling has been to prepare the young man to inherit his legacy. Eric believes that his father is really a superhero called Bat Knight, but no. Rafer is in reality the Abyss, the world's most prominent supervillain. Eric really doesn't want any of this and begins to leave, but Rafer can't have this information getting out and reactivates the robot. Eric pulls out a pocket knife as he dodges the first blast from the robot and manages to take down the robot with relative ease.
Yes, it turns out that Eric's schooling consisted mainly of 10 years of martial arts training alongside an emphasized education on computer programming and engineering.
Rafer is impressed, but he reveals that he placed a bioweapon underneath San Francisco City Hall. Intent on foiling his father's scheme, Eric boards Abyss's jet after donning the suit that Rafer had constructed, and stupidly revealed was needed in order to fly the plane. Eric then tries to locate the bomb, only to wind up getting stopped by the city's greatest hero, the Arrow, and his sidekick Quiver.
What? I don't think I need to explain that.
Eric tries to explain that he's trying to prevent a tragedy, but to little avail, as Arrow tosses the teen around until Eric manages to stun the hero with a blast. Quiver intervenes long enough for Arrow to recover, so Eric unmasks to explain that he's the son of Rafer Hoffman, the Abyss. This leaves Arrow and Quiver looking confused. Abyss's real name was Humphrey Cavendish, and he went to prison a few weeks ago. Also, scans of City Hall have turned up no bomb, and the Abyss jet has vanished. Arrow and Quiver give Eric a ride back to the mansion in their Prius. There, Eric tries to open the door to the lair, only to find cookies in the Cookie Monster jar, and the statue of Shakespeare is just a statue. Arrow and Quiver chalk up Eric's experience to the trauma over his father's death and leave. As Eric sulks, he turns up a floppy disk which contains a message from Rafer explaining that he had to take precautions, and now the true plan is being put into play. It turns out that 2 weeks earlier he called in the assistance of a man named Tony. Elsewhere, Quiver prepares to go clubbing with her boyfriend, Tony. Over the next few days, media scrutiny over Quiver's disappearance intensifies. She's not the first sidekick of the Arrow to ever go missing, or die, or just quit, which has brought out the child endangerment charges.
Except Quiver was going to establishments that served alcohol with a boyfriend who was clearly an adult. So I'm guessing that she's at least 18 years old and thus legally not a child.
Meanwhile, Eric calls General Grant to talk about what he knows about Eric's father. The general plays dumb, which turns out to be a lie, as soon afterwards he contacts both Rafer and Humphrey Cavendish. The trio make plans to appear at the San Francisco Superhero Convention to bring about their grand scheme. However, General Grant forgot to end his phone call with Eric, who winds up overhearing everything. He rushes over to Arrow's penthouse apartment to get some help deciphering some code he found on the disk earlier. Arrow isn't able to turn anything up, and so the two must turn to Arrow's original sidekick, Shaft.
Oh man, Rob Liefeld's gonna sue someone.
Shaft analyzes the code and determines that it's a combination to unlock something, most likely an alternate entrance to the Abyss's lair. The trio prepare to return to Hoffman Manor, only to discover that the Arrow's Prius has been stripped. Shaft is headquartered in a rather rough neighborhood. So they now have to take Shaft's Hummer instead, upsetting the eco-friendly Arrow. The group arrives at the mansion, where they discover the alternate entrance and soon locate Quiver. However, Tony is also waiting with the security robot that has been repaired and reactivated. Arrow and Shaft work on the robot, which has been adjusted to counter Eric's attacks, leaving Eric to work on freeing Quiver. After cutting through the young lady's ropes, Eric directs Arrow and Shaft to crack the underwater glass, which results in Tony getting electrocuted by the short-circuiting robot. Elsewhere, Rafer, Grant, and Humphrey arrive at the Hero Convention. It's then that the trio implement their ultimate plan to take out Arrow, Shaft, and Quiver. With bad publicity.
Seriously, that's the big plan. The villains are going to cosplay as Arrow, Quiver, and Shaft, and then basically insult all the fans at the convention, which is going to lead to the heroes losing on lucrative endorsement deals, which Arrow has stated is how most heroes make a living in the parameters of the universe this comic takes place in.
The heroes don some spare Abyss costumes and book it to the convention just as the villains prepare to address a panel. The heroes rush to the stage and Eric confronts his father. Before Rafer can fire off a shot, though, he's dropped by a repaired and reprogrammed attack robot. The villains are rounded up and taken to prison. There, Rafer receives a visit from a woman who informs him that Abyss is now a hero with a contracted toy line. Rafer points out that Eric is really the best thing the two of them ever really produced and is proud. The woman then excuses herself and takes off. Literally.
And so ends Abyss. Now, there will be a follow-up miniseries to this, but we're going to have to cover that at a later time. But anyway, how is the book? Well, it's pretty good. I think there's some really good... it's a decent enough story with some good enough artwork. I love a lot of the jokes that run through this. It's really kind of funny. There's some scenes where they talk about how Quiver's costume amounts to her having a giant bullseye located square in the middle of her chest. And also some of the way the villains kind of act. I mean, yeah, their big public relations smear campaign is kind of goofy, but it does have an earnestness to it. And I think you can also kind of get that maybe Rafer's ultimate plan is for Eric to have actually been a hero the whole time, because, again, the plan itself is kind of goofy. And also, this series is short. It's only 4 issues, so it's not really going to hit your wallet too terribly hard. That being said, there are a couple of drawbacks. First and foremost, I don't know exactly how it is that Eric found out that General Grant was in on this scheme as well as his father and Cavendish. It seems to imply that Grant idiotically forgot to disconnect the phone call, but I'm not entirely sure. I mean, that's the best I could conclude. It was told in a kind of clunky way, like maybe they forgot this was supposed to be a 4-issue series and they had to rush things. Also, General Grant's name changes. He starts out as General Frank Grant, but then he mysteriously becomes General Richard Grant. Literally within pages, so it's like someone just wasn't paying attention. But those are kind of nitpicky to an extent. They did kind of drag the book down a little bit for me, though, so I am going to give Abyss a B. And with that, let's see what we're doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Remember, you can help support my work at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcatproductions, where you can request a trade to be placed in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box.